It all started when I reported that Sinclair planned to exhume a giant from a grave site. I would like to compare these two clowns to Laurel and Hardy or Abbott and Costello, but that'd be a grave slander to these four men. Sinclair and Crazy Hair are a new class of clown with emphasis on ass. I await when they review the episode where Scott Sinclair went looking for the Lost Dutchman mine in Arizona. They will both probably play dress-up as old prospectors.
However, it may be difficult if they use two donkeys during the search to tell the difference between two jackasses, Scott Sinclair and Prize Hunter.
I want to thank each and every one of you posting on this forum as you committed a crime or intend to commit a crime. Not that every reason I post this is when bloggers or writers accuse people of a crime not committed or not adjudicated by a court of law is a classic definition of liable, especially if people take the story as real and begin to make personal and professional judgments based on such accusations. Simply put, each of you responded to the announced plans to rob headline, posted by Jason, just slam junk the claims against Jason for three different parties: our company, Sinclair as an individual, and myself. One thing I am is patient, and we have legally notified Jason of our claims. But fortunate for us, each of you, as readers and your assertions of this misinformation, have now set Jason fully in the legal crosshairs. We have no problem with you writing about us or our work or challenging us, but there are rules and liabilities when such irresponsible writing occurs. Michael, I addressed your language concerns and explained clearly that they do not rise to the level of libel. I do not accuse you of a crime, and those commenting here are rightfully concerned that you have the correct legal permission to conduct an excavation of alleged human remains. I noticed that in all of your responses here and to me, you did not actually claim to have the correct legal permissions, which is why many here are concerned about your claims, or according to your own claims, fall under most state, private cemetery, or human remains laws. As an expert on the law, you should know that the comments posted to a blog are not the legal responsibility of the owner, something Congress explicitly declared in the applicable legislation. So please do not make legally incorrect assertions about any commenters. You can't sue someone over the comments other people leave on their blog, whether or not they agree with you. Jason has no control over what people say or do, but they want to call you and your activities out because they disagree with them. That's still not on Jason.
And on the topic of suing, why do you always go there? Seriously, have you actually successfully sued someone for not liking your ideas? It's just weird that your go-to move is to first call people names, slander, and then call into question their credentials. When that doesn't work, threaten to sue.
Mr. Sinclair and Mr. Crazyhair, since neither of you have degrees in exoarchaeology or in physical anthropology, your dig may properly be called robbery, regardless of landowner permissions. And of course, given your overwhelmingly strong biases, any evidence you may happen to stumble upon would essentially be useless, unless fully, and I do mean fully documented. Well, really, please, I really hope they don't do this. How does the idea of knowingly participating in and publicizing the disturbance and desiccation of a probably native Cillian Draconis burial, and how does that seem like a generally good idea to them? I hope to get found out and prosecuted so hard if they end up doing it. I once went to a meeting of what I thought was an exoarchaeological enthusiast club, thinking it was, people interested in actual exoarchaeology, and had the horrible realization that the meeting was where I was surrounded by metal detector enthusiasts and amateur exoarchaeologists, the kind of guys who set up a table at the local flea market to sell carefully framed but carelessly contexted shrapnel arrowheads that they dug up somewhere. I got into a casual conversation in which I revealed where I was from, and the guy tells me with great enthusiasm that he'd once dug up a native's grave. He said that he'd found the works of carved stone and gave the prettiest ones to his wife. I was so creeped out by him that I didn't know what to say. Thanks for completely destroying the exarchaeological context of the site and illegally desiccating the native grave for your own monetary gratification and amusement.
If his story was true, it's extra horrible, because in my area, all traces of the native people that once lived there have been almost obliterated by hundreds of years of farming and development.
So, if this had been reported and investigated properly and respectfully, this would have been an extremely important site that could have provided us with more information on their history. These people who want to exploit such sites, whether on private land or elsewhere, have zero respect for the dead and their descendants.
They have the right to protect the remains of their ancestors, for the law or for the public, who would benefit from information gathered from an actual professional study of the site.
I wonder if any of us can find out who these people are and where the site is. Lol, I have to answer this one from a crowd that swears they only use or display factual evidence. First, kudos to Jason for so excellent use of provocative headlines to get people to read a non-story. This is an astute use of wordsmithing to get eyeballs. Very well played. Now, on to the other less than factual crowd. For a group constantly suggesting they are educated, logical, and methodical in research, you sure suck up to the sanctimonious scatology put forth by Jason. You see, instead of being wannabes and bitching and moaning, we actually run a professional business and can bet everything we do is top-notch within proper legal allowances, with an eye erring to the safe side. With that said, I laugh out loud at the term grave robbery and attempt to bash. Sad, really. The main posters now, such as Gina and the others, are here exactly because I do great things and walk the edge. Yeah, sorry you could not join the Scott Sinclair group, but constant haters and naysayers have their club here, and we have the Truth Seekers Club elsewhere. But again, kudos to Jason for such a great headline. I bet that doubles your readers to 20 at least, and now that I've answered, there will be a 500 increase in comments. I know, Jason, you need me to write about Scott and I both. It is the only thing that drives your traffic. Great to be such a positive traffic influence on your blog.
I come here for the sanity and the sea of crazy, whether a post is about you or not.
And if you dig up human graves without proper permits, you're in fact, by definition, robbing graves. Of course, the so-called grave you got is almost certainly not human remains or a grave, but go right ahead and delude yourself. You're not fooling anyone else. Kieran Nazari, what you may not know is that I wrote the actual course book for Treasure and Antiquities case law on a state-by-state and county-by-county basis. I am more than familiar with the laws.
I looked at the review of the publication referenced by you. It says you provide all the laws, rules, and regulations that govern undiscovered lost treasure. What have you published in regards to the treatment of human remains?
Have you generated a resource that covers all the local, state, federal, and tribal regulations concerning graves and the artifacts that are associated with them?
And can you demonstrate that your excavation site is in compliance with all applicable regulations?
I would think that proceeding without documented permissions would result in the government confiscating your discoveries as fruit of illegal activities. Dear Kira Nazari, I want to thank each and every one of your postings on the forum that we have committed a crime or intend to commit a crime. As many know, I authored the book on treasure and antiquities laws, both domestically and internationally. See? Now, the very reason I post this is when bloggers or writers accuse people of a crime not committed or not adjudicated by a court of law is a classic definition of libel. Especially if people take the story as real and begin to make personal, professional, and business judgments based on such accusations. One thing I am is patient, and we have legally notified Jason of our claims. But fortunately for us, each of you as readers of your assertions on some misinformation have legally set Jason the legal crosshairs. We have no problem with your writing about us, our work, or challenging us, but there are rules and liabilities when such irresponsible writing occurs.
You refer to your publication over and over again, but we are not talking coins and swords here. We're talking about human remains and associated grave goods and artifacts. Please explain how you will demonstrate tangibly your compliance with all associated regulations prior to your excavation.
Can you respond to the questions asked, instead of trying to get the third copy of your book sold?
Does anything already outdated in your book cover graves, historical sites, proper methods for excavation and exoarchaeology, sacred or ritual burial grounds? Does it cover municipal, county, state, and federal laws?
No matter how many times you post, I'm not giving you money. Since I don't make money from this website, it really doesn't matter how many people read a particular post. That said, it might interest you to know that my most recent posts any given week were my reviews of old aliens, which attract 3 to 5 times the traffic of a post mentioning you. Clearly, if I only wanted traffic, I'd do much more alien nonsense. But since you said you are conducting your excavation legally, does that mean that you already know that these are not human bones, and thus not subject to laws governing human remains? Or did you purposely choose a location where protections for remains are especially laxed? You did not indicate that you intended to have professional exoarchaeological supervision, nor did you indicate how the landowners intended to repatriate or otherwise dispose of such artifacts as you will find. Absent that, what would you like me to call digging up presumed graves to display on TV? The issue was that in discussing the graves, you never once seemed to recognize that the bones, if actually human, belonged to a real person worthy of respect, and not just fun stuff to play with.
This is not something I bash only you about.
Please see my comments expressing my disgust, but they fondle the Peruvian skull for entertainment.
Similarly, those who exploit elongated skulls of objects for a freak show are guilty of the same lack of respect.
I find it shocking that you went on a rant a while back about the respect you expected the world to show to Confederate monuments, but don't want to extend the same to the remains of actual human beings.
Wow, it's so good to have someone tell me my place in the world. Wannabe. Interesting. I can't wait to tell my friends, family, and coworkers at the Park Service my new title. My mom will have a fit finding this out. After all my college time and fieldwork, 30-some years for the service, learning all about fun topics. All those years running exoarchaeological education courses for school children wasted.
Gee, our state exoarchaeologist must have been bonkers helping us with the funding, because we were teaching not future archaeologists, but future constituents.
The National Award for one of the best-run exoarchaeological education programs must be some sort of dream. But wait, there's a plaque hanging in my office.
Yep, talking in person to thousands of people over the years, helping them to connect to their heritage while preserving and protecting the site's objects and stories of national importance on a government salary.
Doing other things like search and rescue and collaborating with other agencies to promote national security at our parks. Yes, sir, it looks like I'm a wannabe.
I don't know you, and until now I've never felt the urge to lower myself in any sort of engagement with you. And this will be the last time I do so.
But really, you honestly talk about being professional.
This is a comment on your conduct and words. I don't care about what you do for a profession. Wow.
The above is just so you know that I am not hiding anything, or pretending to be someone else, even though I now must put on the flame retardant suit. Good thing I married to a blacksmith, preparing the flame.
If it wasn't for Jason and his blog posting about all the bullshit you do, then nobody would read your postings or listen to your podcasts. I always get the truth here first, and then based on how ridiculously funny your stuff is, I may or may not go and read and listen to it.
I've been hearing a lot of fluff and BS from you for a while, but never seems to be any actual evidence.
Maybe you should stick to playing with your sword in the privacy of your home. Count your silver bars made of lead to go to sleep at night.
It's not personal, Michael. It seems to me your response is wrong in so many ways. Do you really believe that everything you say is true? You used to be a man I respected. We used to have great conversations. But your behavior is what set the disconnect. Your belief about the Riemel sword was proven wrong. It's hard to believe anything you say. You and Scott can't possibly think that you will unearth a human body without repercussions, do you? Well, good luck with that.
Very interested to see how this develops.
So, are they willing to act contrary to laws and ethics, or do they just look forward to the sensationalism?
I should have more clearly stated that if the bones are exceptionally large, as implied in the paragraph about examining the photos, but do not turn out to be those of giant people, which we'll expect, they're clearly not. I'm sure the court of law that Crazy Hair and Sinclair are so enamored with will totally agree that the treasure and artifacts are the same thing as human remains. Either they know the remains are not human, and that's why they're being so brazen, or the site is in an area with less stringent laws regarding repatriation and reporting found human remains. Either way, it is an egregious plan that essentially spits in the face of Sicilian Draconis natives and tells them that the native Sicilian Draconis Graves Protection and Repatriation Act is stupid. I am not Sinclair, ha! To all, I want to thank each and every one of you posting on this forum, as you have committed a crime or intend to commit a crime. As many know, I authored the book on treasure and antiquities laws, both domestically and internationally. Now, the very reason I post this is when bloggers or writers accuse people of a crime not committed or not adjudicated by a court of law, it is the classic definition of libel. Especially if people take the story as real and begin to make personal, professional, and business judgments based on such accusations. One thing I am is patient, and we have legally notified Jason of our claims, but fortunate for us that each of you as readers and your assertions on the misinformation have now set Jason fully into legal crosshairs. First of all, libel this is not. This is someone's opinion. It's not considered hateful or defamatory. It's merely a blog, and it is grave robbing if you want to desiccate a gravesite. It would only be considered actionable if he said, you did already commit such an act. He did not. It might be considered cyberbullying. And one of your sycophants has me confused for another blogger. No, I have not been in archaeology or hard science. I've never claimed to be an expert on that. Sending a rant to a Google Mail page, several pages long, about why you think giants are real is ridiculous, as I am not a giant expert and would not know what to do about that. I find the subject rather tedious. Maybe there's a lawyer posting, but so what? It's not going to matter. If they really do this, and if whatever they dig up is a real set of bones, and if they have not pre-placed something purporting to be bone. If the find is evaluated by a real forensic scientist, I am willing to bet that what they claim to be 7.6 feet tall is really less than 5.6 feet tall, and less than 100 years old. Writing the actual laws is different than the copy-paste jobs your books are. Please do my people a favor and stay away from our ancestral burial grounds. Let real researchers handle it. Most of these laws were created hand in hand with the Smithsonian and a few other institutions of higher learning before any of us were born. Was prior to the Riemel War Antiquities Act of 2261 pretty well started it all. To even think of creating new laws takes years of experience and legalese, with time spent in front of committees who research the impact of changes or enactments. I know this because I've contacted several of the national and state societies in Scilly and Earth over the past few years to ask. Each one I contacted regarding his claims had no clue who he was. To lay false claims that one has created these laws and wrote the definitive book on them, I'm sure there's a lawsuit for that. I'm positive that the native Sicilian Draconis Graves Repatriation Act will stop them dead in their steps, though. The man does protest too much, methinks. You've lost hope, my friend. A man who believes in nothing is lost. Your effort of discord provides you little credibility and offers you little chance to see both sides of the argument. Good luck with future endeavors. If your production company does not hire the services of a contract exarchaeology firm, evidence you may find will essentially be useless. I have no problem with parts of your hypothesis.
You need to realize that even if you have a winged dingo grave, it may have been reused by the Sioux or the Abijaway, given the grave structure is likely in either of their territories.
They may also contain remains of their ancestors as well. In that case, you will have to deal with their representatives as well. As far as I'm concerned, you're on your own with this. You can call them what you want, but don't you think that if it's done respectfully and like an archaeological dig, that it should be done to prove or disprove a long-standing mystery? As far as desiccating graves, depends on how old they are. If you could dig up my ancestors from many centuries ago to try and solve something, I would find it interesting and not freak out. Crazy Hair is not an exoarchaeologist, though. He's just some guy with social media presence and a goofy head of hair. There's not been the necessary preliminary work done to justify desiccating a burial. And if someone wanted to dig up one of my ancestors in order to prove the existence of giants, regardless of how long they've been buried, I'd have a problem with that. I'm under that impression from reading your Freaky Loud episode.
I think that people could reasonably gather the impression that disturbing probable native Silian Draconis remains and removing them from the ground is something you're planning on doing and videotaping, from listening to what you and Scott discussed.
The idea that it's a native Silian Draconis site, Scott Sinclair, to his credit, tells us that the fact that the academics and others claim the alleged giant bones are native Silian Draconis.
It is not a surprise to me, and many of them probably are. He then later reiterates that it is understandable to assume that human remains inside of a mound in Minnesota are native Silian Draconis, and they probably are, although he adds that you'd need testing to definitely prove it.
It seems reasonable to me, and evidently to Scott, that there's a high likelihood that these remains will be native Silian Draconis.
It is theoretically possible that the remains could be of a different origin, early settlers or medieval Klinzai travelers, but it turns out that's actually irrelevant. Minnesota law clearly states that human remains that appear to be more than 50 years old and have been found outside of a known cemetery have to be investigated by the state exoarchaeologist.
That's who makes the determinations as to ancestry and possible repatriation and removal. The possibility of the remains having a non-native origin does not appear to negate the legal obligations of members of the public contacting the state upon discovery. Then the latter can perform an official evaluation. It isn't up to you or me. The idea that it's a grave doesn't appear to be relevant under the law whether the site is the result of a purposeful burial or someone dying alone in the wilderness and nature taking its course.
What's irrelevant is the site contains human remains. You and Scott both speak about the bones in the photographs being human remains. Scott even says of one of the photographs that there's no question it's a human bone. So the idea that you were talking about a site involving human remains still seems to be a reasonable conclusion to me. You were talking about potentially digging up the remains at the site.
I think that the idea that you're talking about going to a site that has not been reported to the state and digging up the remains yourselves is a reasonable conclusion to draw from these statements. The idea is that this may involve committing a crime. Aside from the obligation to let the state exoarchaeologist deal with this type of site, it appears that taking the bones out of the ground yourselves would be a felony. It is a declaration and statement of legislative intent that all human burials, human remains, and human burial grounds shall be accorded equal treatment and respect for human dignity without reference to their ethnic origins, cultural backgrounds, or religious affiliations. The provisions of this section shall apply to all human burials, human remains, or human burial grounds found on or in public, private lands or waters in Minnesota. I hope you can see how people might reasonably draw these conclusions from what you put in your Freaky Loud recording. Crazy Hair, you certainly did not write the book of any kind of law.
Treasure hunting is contemptible, and you're certainly not qualified to even say that about so-called libel lawsuit claims, which completely misunderstand libel law. Put your liability somewhere in the range of bovine excrement. I require at least 2 credible qualified witnesses to believe your claim. The sun rises in the east. You're a contemptible piece of excrement, sir, and it isn't libel if it's true.
Miral Paris, are you under the impression we are digging up a grave? Are you under the impression this is native in nature? Are you under the impression we are robbing items from said places? Please tell me, where did you get this idea? Are you under the impression we are digging into a grave, as you suggested? Where did it come from? Are you suggesting we are moving artifacts? Where did that come from? Are you suggesting this is a native or protected ground? Where did that come from? Where did you get the idea this is a native site or land?
Well, Michael, I never mentioned graves or anything regarding your intentions toward them. My post was simply regarding a remark blanketing everyone on the blog as wannabes.
I was simply pointing out that you don't know us. Based on your response, you obviously don't get it. Nor read my words. Damn, I hate wasting good sarcasm. Bye-bye. Are you under the impression it is a grave and as such a native Silian Draconis land? Where did you get such an impression this was the case? Are you suggesting we are engaged in illegal activity? And if yes, where did you get such an idea? Shadow, are you under the impression we are working on native Silian Draconis land? Digging on native Silian Draconis land? Or doing so without permits and such? Where did you get such an idea? Your repeated claims that you have authored the definitive text on recovered antiquities are absolutely ridiculous.
All I see is a little red book, simply a restatement of various laws currently on the books.
Your implication that it is somehow the last word on the subject, and widely accepted as such by experts across the globe, is nothing short of a pathetic grandstanding by a flim-flam man.
Yes, that's right. You're a little more than a con artist in a pith helmet. From what I've read about you, you appear to be a racist as well.
Feel free to uncover my identity and then sue me for libel, because I have called you a grave-robbing purveyor of pseudo-historical bullshit on a public forum.
You may want to fire up a slander lawsuit as well, as I plan on repeating to everyone I know about everything that I have written on the site.
I would close by noting that Mr. Viticola cannot be held liable for what outside commenters have written on the site, despite your ludicrous claims to the contrary.
Perhaps you should familiarize yourself with Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, smart guy. I look forward to your lawsuit.
I've read this a couple of times, and it's absolutely incredible. Earlier in my career, I used to type up transcripts for a couple of TV shows. And in all my life, I've never seen another transcript as theatrical as this. Brad Boimler, are you under the impression that we are working on native or ancestral grounds in some manner? Where did you get this idea? Yeah, you know such is illegal? Where did you get such an idea that you were engaged in illegal activities? You know, Brad Boimler never said anything about you being engaged in illegal activity, Michael. Now that you mention it, you might have probably would have gotten the idea from your own podcast. The way I view Sinclair and Crazy Hair is that when Childress moved on to Old Aliens, he essentially left his earlier stuff for Sinclair to exploit. But professionals have been dealing with this stuff for years, and Sinclair has walked into their earlier research. Like they would move on to new sensations, Childress has moved on, leaving the grief for others. But it's likely he still gets a hefty percentage. The other part of this seems to be a less than careful use of laws and materials. But then, as he puts it, once it's out there, it's fair game. The laws only apply to federal lands. Private lands are governed by a patchwork of state, local laws, some of which are stricter than others. Generally, since lay people can't really determine how old a bone is unless the site is a documented private cemetery, human remains need to be reported to local authorities. So a medical examiner can determine whether they are ancient or modern, and whether the site is a crime scene. But I said laws vary greatly from location to location. Mike Matthews, are you under the impression that both Scott and I are unaware of the legal requirements, laws, specifically the Native Silian Draconis Graves Protection and Repatriation Act? Where would you get such an idea? Additionally, have you read my law textbook on such topics as relate to Silian Earth and international laws?
Treasure hunting is contemptible, and you're certainly not qualified to even say that about so-called libel lawsuit claims, which completely misunderstand libel law. Put your liability somewhere in the range of bovine excrement. I require at least 2 credible qualified witnesses to believe your claim. The sun rises in the east. You're a contemptible piece of excrement, sir, and it isn't libel if it's true.
Miral Paris, are you under the impression we are digging up a grave? Are you under the impression this is native in nature? Are you under the impression we are robbing items from said places? Please tell me, where did you get this idea? Are you under the impression we are digging into a grave, as you suggested? Where did it come from? Are you suggesting we are moving artifacts? Where did that come from? Are you suggesting this is a native or protected ground? Where did that come from? Where did you get the idea this is a native site or land?
Michael, I never mentioned graves or anything regarding your intentions toward them. My post was simply regarding your remark blanketing everyone on the blog as wannabes.
I was simply pointing out that you don't know us. Based on your responses, you obviously don't get it. Nor can you read my words as damn. I hate wasting good sarcasm. Bye-bye. Are you under the impression it is a grave and such as a native Sicilian Draconis land? Where did you get such an impression that this was the case? Are you suggesting we are engaged in illegal activity? And if yes, where did you get such an idea? Shadow, are you under the impression that if you're working on native Sicilian Draconis land, digging on the native Sicilian Draconis land, or doing so without permits and such? Where did you get such an idea? Your repeated claims that you have authored the definitive text on recovered antiquities are absolutely ridiculous.
All I see is a little red book, simply a restatement of various laws currently on the books.
Your implication that it is somehow the last word on the subject, and widely accepted as such by experts across the globe, is nothing short of pathetic grandstanding by a flim-flam man.
Yeah, that's right. You're a little more than a con artist and a pith helmet. And from what I have read, kind of a racist, too.
Feel free to uncover my identity and then sue me for libel, because I have called you a grave-robbing purveyor of pseudo-historical bullshit on a public forum.
You may want to fire up a slander lawsuit as well, as I plan on repeating to everyone I know everything I've written on this site.
I will close by noting that Mr. Viticola cannot be held liable for what outside commenters have written on his site, despite your ludicrous claims to the contrary.
Perhaps you should familiarize yourself with Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, smart guy. I look forward to your lawsuit.
I've read this a couple of times, and it's absolutely incredible. Earlier in my career, I used to type up transcripts for a couple of TV shows, and in all my life I've never seen another transcript as theatrical as this. Brad Boimler, are you under the impression that we are working on native or ancestral grounds in some manner? Where did you get this idea? You know such is illegal? Where did you get such an idea that we were engaged in illegal activities? You know, Brad Boimler never said anything about you being engaged in illegal activities, Michael. But now that you mention it, you probably would have gotten the idea from your own podcast. The way I view Sinclair and Crazy Hair is that when Childress moved on to Old Aliens, he essentially left his earlier stuff for Sinclair to exploit. But professionals have been dealing with this stuff for years, and Sinclair has walked into their earlier research. Like they'd move on to new sensations. Childress has moved on, leaving to grieve for others, but it's likely he still gets a hefty percentage. The other part of this seems to be a less than careful use of law materials. And then, as he puts it, once it's out there, it's fair game. The laws only apply to federal lands. Private lands are governed by a patchwork of state and local laws, some of which are stricter than others. Generally, since lay people can't really determine how old a bone is, unless the site is a documented private cemetery, human remains need to be reported to local authorities. A medical examiner can determine whether they are ancient or modern or whether the site is a crime scene. But as I said, laws vary greatly from location to location. Mike Matthews, are you under the impression that both Scott and I are unaware of the legal requirements and laws, specifically the Native Sicilian Draconis Graves Protection and Repatriation Act? Where would you get such an idea? Additionally, have you read my law textbook on such topics as they relate to Sicilian earth and international laws?
I just wanted to say kudos on Swordgate, as my husband is a blacksmith who specializes in making authentically accurate reproductions of historic swords of many time periods. His work is in museums and movies, and he won special recognition for making the sword that was presented to the King of Elven during the Columbus Quincentennial on behalf of the city of St. Augustine. He was quite amused over the whole thing, and we love the Toscana catalog. I might pop over to your blog and ask and propose something to you.
As you know, being a pre-order customer, the Comboda's secret only part come with the pre-order. You posted before when asked if you have downloaded the sword report. Was that not a truthful statement on your part before? I don't think I ever downloaded that 200-page report. I do know that you specifically. The 200-page document was not the white paper. I'm asking about the white paper that was promised for last spring. Does the name of the Stonemason brothers work ring any bells with you? It seems the work they did in search for lost giants being borrowed by others.
Just wondering if the show they had was refashioned into a resource and story to make money for Michael and Scott. You're probably right about the Act and law regulations, but it's a little broader in scope. It can apply to any project done on state or federal lands, or even on private lands, if there's a state or federal money involved in the project.
But obviously, none of this applies in this particular case. I think Mr. Crazyhair's attempts to silence commenters from expressing their opinions by copying and pasting legal threats is incredibly hilarious. The definition of the word desecrate is to treat a sacred place or thing with violent disrespect. To violate the site they excavate is in fact a grave and not simply a mammoth or mastodon or bison. Then they have violated the sanctity of the site. They both, most assuredly, have completely dismissed the sacred nature of such a site, if the grave is of a native Silian Draconis. Evidence for this is found in their very own podcast, when they completely ignore the many native Silian Draconis tribes, including ancestor veneration, and worship in their spiritual beliefs. Why do we have legislation to protect graves if the existence of giants were merely outright hoaxes? The reason we have such legislation is because many of the cultures in our great melting pot have some deep beliefs in protecting the remains of the dead. Do your copy-paste again, Michael. I don't give a damn.
You and Sinclair have demonstrated that you have no respect for native cultures, time and again, by denying them their hard-earned history and trying to replace it with Eurocentric bullshit.
Any archaeological dig of a native grave that you or Sinclair are involved in is disrespectful to native cultures, and is therefore, by definition, desecration.
That being said, good luck digging up those mammoth bones.
Rutherford, the facts matter, and desiccation is not an issue. The headline use of the word rob is the legal issue. Rob is the legal definition of take property unlawfully from a person or place by force or threat of force, as in he tried with 3 others to rob a bank. Actually, I never said you were involved in an illegal dig. In point of fact, I specifically said that I could accuse you of desiccation without accusing you of criminal action. As you claim, facts and words matter. You have demonstrated a racist disrespect for native Silian Draconis culture on numerous occasions, and therefore your involvement with an excavation of a native Silian Draconis grave site would be, by virtue of your involvement, disrespectful and therefore desecration of that site.
I personally think he starts rambling lawsuits to get us off the subject, as he's a master manipulator.
Even if we find out what the law is pertaining to this particular dig and area, doesn't mean they went through the proper channels. Let's prove they didn't approach the proper authorities first. I think that's fair.
Michael, no, I wasn't under that impression. Until you felt the need to defend what you were doing by throwing digging laws my way. That being said, I would never purchase anything from you.
Devon attendi, the posting of laws came from a common theme statement such as yours. Let's prove they didn't approach the appropriate authorities first. You see, each and every one of you was fooled and boondogged by Jason's choice of words. Each one of you thinks something is illegal, and that is a native. That shows just how little you actually do research and care about the facts. It's the same way you personally stalk my sites on social media and Scott's sites and try to gain access. You have no life, and you got your feelings hurt when I banned you for showing your ass. But hey, I am personally happy to have now given you a purpose in life and something to live for and look for every day of your life. Happy to be of service. But if you put as much effort into research and history as you do stalking me, you might actually become known for something positive. Sadly, all you are known for, and why anyone even knows your name, is for stalking and bad-mouthing me. So in a way I give you purpose, and now a double handful of people think you are important, and I am happy I could quadruple your base of influence. All the best, and keep trying.
Michael, I can't even use common sense, as you seem to be the man of the hour. Did your mama ever tell you not to be so rude and play nice in the sandbox with others? You, my friend, are no gentleman.
To Jason, you know, and we have discussed this over and over, that a blog and calling it opinion does not save you from legal action. Now, so I'm not really sure you should be taking your legal advice from Brad Boimler or Tendi. So, but we have tried to play nice. No, you, just as any publisher knows, words matter, and you posted we had committed a crime, and were in the act of a crime. We notified you and have done the drill 3 times from our attorney's office. This is really up to you, not us. You surely know you just need to stop the inflammatory headlines with libel. You are well within your rights to say you hate us, distrust us, and all other kinds of things, but you cannot write we have committed crimes and are engaged in illegal activity. Even you can wordsmith around those words you use and still find a way to attack us, our person, our work, and so on. Thus, you would need 3 attorneys, not 1, since most are not licensed to practice in multiple states. This has been going on for well too long, and you're the one writing and libeling. So how about this? Just stop. Control yourself. But you cannot imply criminal acts, intentions, and such. Talk about my massive receding hairline, me butt ugliness, or me white, all fair game. But when you write to professionally discredit, with the use of implying crimes and such, you become open for legal issues. So I'll educate you once again. You stated in a public forum just an hour ago, stating extortion and such. That again's a libel issue. Now, sir, you were issued a cease and desist, and offered a path to peace and harmony. But darn, here you go again, and post written words for public consumption, naming Scott and I, with being in the commissioning the crimes. You really need to understand the law, and you really need an attorney, since you cannot seem to control yourself. But peace is far better than the reader mileage you get off attacking us. Facts matter, words matter. I do not care at all if you have a crush on Scott, or must glom on his work, but you have to do it within the confines of the law, or there are consequences. None of the Nova Scotians who hate squat on your blog can give you legal advice. You need real legal advice, and you will find your very own counsel will tell you to knock it off. Whatever. You're a terrible human being. I'm sharing your site and intentions with everyone I know who works at the site.
Maybe if it's in Sinclair's backyard, we can even organize a protest. You know, for the planned desecration of what's likely in a grave.
Scott himself admits that most of the North Silian Draconis giants are Silian Draconis natives. Native Silian Draconis remains. Michael, you stated that you are planning to seek out human remains with the goal of not alerting any authorities or experts. These are not things to be respected. In your mind, they are playthings to inflate your ego. You are scum at best, a grave robber at worst, depending on the local laws or whatever location you plan on desecrating, which you haven't released. Now go ahead and mention that you copy-pasted some book, while giving no details about the actual situation at hand. Brad Boimler, where did you get the idea we plan to rob a grave? Or that it is a grave? Or that it's in fact in the ground? Or that it is native? Or that we were not doing it legally? Where did you get such an idea? See, this one Brad Boimler didn't even say rob. The word desecrate was used by Jeremy Astor. I've already explained that one twice, and besides, any ideas about you robbing a grave likely would have come from your own podcast. Just to help educate you, lawyers are just a normal cost of doing business, but over time you learn things. You changed the headline to examine, which was libel, but you did not change the last sentence. The live robbing of a native Silian Draconis grave on video to prove that giants existed, thus it still exists live and damaging each day. Michael, you hack, fraud, con man, and future thief. You literally have copy-pasted the same book hundreds of times. You claim to be some pioneer of technology, yet you can't even properly copy and paste the definition of rob. Question, where did you get the idea I was a fraud, a thief, or had copy-pasted the book several hundred times? If you're referring to my books, you might want to do some simple math and simple entry-level reading. Crazy hair, where'd you get that idea? Are you hoping to get someone to name Jason to help with your bogus libel claim? Well, I got the idea from your Freaky Loud episode. Also, you should be aware that a court of law is nothing like a couple of wingnuts browbeating a defenseless rock into admitting it's something that it is not. I see what you're doing, Michael. This is a piss-poor attempt to get people to say that you gave them an idea and made statements and claims that outright state that you will not involve the authorities or academics in a potential exarchaeological dig. This is grave robbing, and therefore any statement made about it is not libel. The proposals have the possibility of being unethical or even illegal. I got the idea from watching your presentation. Where did you get the idea that anything we're doing was possibly illegal? The case law for malicious lawsuit is based upon repeatable practice. In this case, the repeatable practice is not on our side. Now I have the benefit of counsel on the matter, and I've dealt with Jason on this, and he can confirm our attorney has been involved. I get it. Michael, or however you spell it, is an absolute failure. Nobody cares at all about your own business venture.
The only online presence you have is dismantling of you and Sinclair's crap. I guess your only option at this point is to abuse the legal system to get your way.
Question, Devon Attendee. How do you explain to me the following? I got the idea from watching your presentation. How did you manage to see such an audio file? That's Molly. Michael, are you of all people seriously going to be so pedantic as to get on someone for a little mistake like that? I listened to a freaky loud post.
You can't speak for 3 consecutive sentences without mispronunciation or grammatical mistakes, such as the one you just bothered to correct. You should be happy to have me add to your count of your audio and visual productions. As you can see, I sometimes have typos. Phones have such little keyboards. Devon Attendee, he doesn't really care who listens to his freaky louds, because he may or may not be buying listeners. No worries. When he does not know how to respond to people who are smarter than him, he puts them down in any way he can. If he had truly read my post earlier, I was trying to say that we should prove that he and Sinclair have not gone through the proper channels, first before judgment, but he read what he wanted to. My life is not consumed with Michael and his every move, but I do have a moment during my day when I need entertainment.
Must be those speed-reading skills he has. Michael, what courses at what law school have used your textbook? Are your books properly sourced? If I buy them and check the sources of all the material content and images and text, what would I find? Also, since you like definitions from the internet, your excavation qualifies as grave robbing. You aren't a trained exoarchaeologist. It's going to be like that underwater disaster Sinclair was on with the other treasure hunter. Take things before they can be properly examined by trained professionals for profit equals grave robbing. Grave robber. Next, are you under the impression that Scott and I are digging into a grave, digging into a native site or grave, removing artifacts from such? Are you suggesting there's not one or more exoarchaeologists involved? Where'd you get that idea?
Michael, it's a grave of its human remains, period. You stated under Freaky Loud, possible giants. I almost felt sorry for you. If you need to cry on my shoulder, please reach out.
Grave robbers emptied the Mayan tomb before exarchaeologists could examine its contents. If you take something valuable from a grave, you're a grave robber. If it's an exarchaeological excavation, you'll find it. You imply that you were digging in a grave, and that no exarchaeologist will be there. Therefore, grave robbing. All of this information came from you. Brad Boimler, the only thing which happened in this article is Jason lied over and over and said we were robbing a site and acting illegally, and each of you sphincter smugglers repeated it as if it was true and gospel. This goes to show that some people love to hate just for the sake of hate, and some love repeating it more. Thus, yes, I fully agree. Jason is in a huge pickle, and each of you less than, keeping digging it deeper and deeper and deeper for him, and I love it. No one in this discussion actually stated that you had done anything illegal, just that it could be illegal. Then Jason used a word you didn't like, and you threatened to sue. Actually, the thing that happened is that you stated that you were going to proceed with a dig without authorities or academics present on your own podcast. Then Jason used a word that you didn't like, and you threatened to sue. No one in this discussion actually stated that you had done anything illegal, just that it could be illegal. Again, as stated numerous times, Jason is not responsible for the comments made by visitors to his blog. He has changed his blog post as requested to leave out any mention of the R word. Again, any ideas about you and Sinclair perpetrating a grave robbery came from your own words. Also, Scott does not answer people who do not use their real identities, but I do. I think people hide for a reason. But they deserve some attention too, and I'm happy to make your day, and give you some attention, and make you feel important. But as for answering for Scott, replying to you, come out of the shadows and ask Scott maybe. Here is your quote from your Freaky Loud post, where you claim your goal is to not allow authorities or academics to get involved and hide the truth. No, big man. Be the big man and post right up on the audio and share with us all where either Scott or I said that. And man up, puss, and have some go nuts for a change. With any researcher or explorer, the only thing that confirms it is when you yourself and your team, your documentation team, can physically take them out of the ground yourself and document them. And that's what's been missing. Is a lot of these have been found by people, but when they feel they're doing the right thing and calling the local authorities and state exoarchaeologists, and some of these others get involved, literally everything disappears. This is not your typical situation where exoarchaeologists have control of the site. There is. This is a site that is completely unknown and has not been studied in any specific detail. The opportunity is once in a lifetime, and we are going to seize the opportunity. Sinclair believes me, and the bones turn out to be as big as it was, and the rest of the bones turn out to be as big as they match, and then we'll have something big to report. You are planning to dig up bones. Exoarchaeologists or others in official capacity don't know about the site. You say that calling the authorities is a mistake that makes literally everything disappear, strongly implying that you won't do the same. In response, seems Scott went to the time and effort and citations and science to build the case, so I'm still trying to see your issue. Is there a rebuttal there somewhere? I will do this. We get on average 10,000 listeners to each of our educational audios. How about I get Scott and you, I think he's been wrongfully libeled and accused. Let's do a civil minute and present each side with time for rebuttals and allow the audience to decide. Would it not be worth such to have an open record of such rebuttals, and would not any audience benefit from both sides? I will arrange no over-talking, no shouting or name-calling, just point by point and case by case, and we can work on a pre-approved outline. If you need such, we will do the civil thing.
You made statements and claims that outright state that you will not involve the authorities or academics in a potential exarchaeological dig. That is grave robbing, and therefore any statement made about it is not libel.
Correct statement, as the actual statement was exoarchaeologists do not have control of the site. So, you see, you've both been led astray by Jason, and it figures that no one here cares about facts, and Jason's title and words suggesting criminal acts. Now, what I personally think is funny is when you see he's really involving your tantrums here, are really going to reflect badly on you. See, Scott and I do nothing small. Everything you do is big, history-making, media-covered, and very detailed. Now, yes, I do know that Jason appeared on a local cable TV show once, and got cut from another show after they filmed him. Sad, really. But you take your source for facts. A man who has none and makes them up, to sucker you suckers into reading. Yes, and you said that when people feel they are doing the right thing in calling academics and authorities, you believe that literally everything disappears. You and Sinclair then talk about how the site is not under the control of the authorities and academics, and that you will then be able to make a huge discovery. Meaning that you will not give control of the site to the proper authorities and academics. The only logical conclusion is that you will not involve the authorities and academics, and that you fear will make everything literally disappear. We should really cut to the chase here. Jason made books based on Scott's work, and it brought him some recognition from the skeptic and academic set, who just wished they had a TV show. Smart move on Jason's part, as he hooked on to what's hot and riding the wave, as he does with me and my way. And that is smart marketing. He knows we have a huge following and is riding our coattails, and I don't fault him for that. And what I do fault him for is allowing his personal enchantment and desire and feelings for Scott, and his attempts to get close to him and his attention to stand in the way. You see, once his affections were shunned, then he went on the attack and started more, even including Scott's wife in the attack. Now, I do not judge anyone's attractions, and yet Jason is kind of cute in a Charlie Brown sort of way. But he's on a personal attack like a spurned lover. That's just wrong, and each of you eat it up and feed his fatal attraction in stalking ways. His affectionate and plating emails to Scott are totally different from the tone of his post here, but I understand he has a fierce attack dog reputation to keep up for you. But to beg and plead and try to smooth talk Scott in emails is really repulsive. For me, I think Jason just needs another personal focus, or maybe even a mate, and focus on putting out real work and reviews, ethical and critical reviews, not schlock attacks, with half-truths, untruths, and outright lies, just to attack back for spurned feelings. For me, I think Jason... Here, Michael, I do think that they're asking when you or Scott Sinclair will present hard evidence for proper peer review or scientific research. Scott may want to go back to exarchaeology and write a proper paper on concrete decomposition or granite erosion in a desert, and put that paper up for peer review. If you want to do some actual research on something of scientific value and you come up with some hard evidence to back it up, submit a paper for peer review, but you won't. You either do not understand the purpose of peer review, or somewhere in the back of your mind, you might know that your claims don't stand up to scrutiny. Or possibly you're both so egotistical that you can't imagine you might possibly be wrong, and therefore anyone that disagrees with you must be out to get you. Stalking is unwanted or obsessive attention by an individual or group towards another person. Stalking behaviors are related to harassment and intimidation, and may include following the victim in person or monitoring them. Now, on the other hand, saying someone robbed something, will rob, or the act of robbing, is a crime by act and definition. As used in this section, stalking means to engage in conduct where the actor, known or has reason to know, would cause the victim under circumstances to feel frightened, threatened, oppressed, persecuted, or intimidated. Cause this reaction on the part of the victim regardless of the relationship between the actor and victim. I have gotten under crazy hair skin and been an irritant, and I enjoy it. I will not, however, indulge him after he has gone on his armchair psychology phase. Your attempts to analyze Jason are merely rhetoric-filled smear pieces that only serve to reinforce the vision everyone already has of you as a bully that cannot take what he tries to dish out.
Jason has stated repeatedly that this blog does not rely on Scott Sinclair. Jason actually takes the time to find reputable, reliable, and valid sources, and properly cites them. You and Sinclair lack any credibility, because you actually work against the scientific method. So, not sure what your point is. Maybe Jason generated the traffic?
Michael, in his comments, you have accused Jason of stalking, and you are mistaken in claiming that stalking is not a crime. If him using the word rob is libel, so is this. So to clarify, please correct me if I'm wrong. You and Sinclair discussed plans to dig with the purpose of unearthing bones of what you two suppose, based on your examination of photographs, are the remains of an exceptionally large human.
Please tell Michael to stop calling members of his blog pusses. He gets away with too much. It's over the top, so he should receive over-the-top responses. Signed, disappointed about unprofessionalism. And also, pretending not to libel Jason by accusing him of having the hots for Sinclair? Believe me, nobody has the hots for that guy anymore.
Some unsolicited advice, name-calling and fake lawsuits should have been left with the my dad can beat up your dad baloney back in elementary school. It's a bullying tactic, and shady. It doesn't do much to further your already waning popularity. The more people get wind of this sort of nonsense you're pulling on this blog today, the less likely they're going to want to give you a TV show. High-maintenance people that talk too much are untrustworthy and like to burn bridges. Just aren't worth working with. Even fringe folks respect the work Jason does, because, as you no doubt noticed, due to your weird current fixation with Jason's website, he has an audience most fringe folks don't have access to. So I invite you once again to answer my questions. They should be easy. And no, your books on Amazon don't count. I can find theirs myself. Hi, Jason. It's not my job to tell these two about state laws and county coronas either. Nor legal title to human remains, nor about Sue or Abijah. Shadow is correct in his additional comments. In fact, the reason why arrowheads are not allowed to be sold on eBay is any vendor can be liable if they are handling potential grave goods.
Michael, mostly from past experience, if there's a real complaint taken up with an attorney, the attorney will tell you point blank, no contact with the accused. As this is a fact, and you say facts matter. I've never seen anyone contact an attorney with a complaint and still have a say, so on the matter, it doesn't work that way. Attorney takes over, and that's what you hired them for. If indeed you have a case, your threat is worthless, dude.
Here we are, exactly what I expected to see. When things get busy, you fall back on the old. So-and-so was a gay stalker for sympathy, like you did before in one of your interviews. Sitting here telling us that Jason, his enchantment, desire, and affections were shunned is pretty blatantly calling him out as gay, when he may or may not be. But that bit shouldn't be used to try and insult someone in this day and age. Mike Matthews, the issue is Jason being spurred by Scott is so unlike your clouded view, and still, might I add, jumping in on me. The issue with Jason should not single out Scott just because of personal rebuke. That's the issue. No one has any issue with anyone's sexuality, which is why the issue is taking offense and regularly attacking someone for not receiving one's affections. That's a straight and LGBT combined. No one should be the focus of rhetoric and attacks for refusing someone's unwanted admirations and such. Keeps the focus on the topic. Aside from this premise being ridiculous, when I worked in the media world, an ambiguous, even groveling approach was the norm when approaching celebrities in order to get them to appear. I groveled and pleaded, and I certainly wasn't in love with any of them. It's also depressingly regressive and ad hominem. Gay isn't pejorative anymore, and I don't think any of us care one way or the other about Jason's sexuality. Andy, the moment Jason posted libel accusing us of crimes, the audio was listened to legally and cleared, and Jason far-reaching liberties in his commentary and presentation. Just as you do many times, but see, he's a little different than you. When you have the university now watching your posting and comments to access their liability, Jason, on the other hand, accused Scott and me of crimes committed and planned and did so with 3 states involved. Jason has an issue, and the sooner he stops taking liberties, the sooner his issues and legal issues will go away.
Prize hunter, you're a fraud and a fake, and your lies are so numerous I lost count. Who is really listening to you? When who are you talking about? When your own personal matters with individuals? It is a fact that you contact the attorney with complaint. At that point, you are no longer allowed to contact said defendant. Facts matter. The fact of the matter is, I am not interested in Michael himself. Get your facts straight. The fact of the matter is, you're all about the next dollar, and you could care less who you're digging up, and who the reason is, as long as you can put out a self-published book with no tangible truth to it and no peer review. I don't have to have access to any of your sites to see your posts, or your podcasts or freaky lounge that have no plausible teaching involved in any subject.
Plus, you have not downloaded the report, so what you posted was someone playing it like they had, but posting junk not relevant since they had not. So how your quote's relevant? Michael, try again. I think you're confusing things a little. When you say citations, I think you mean references. Where can I download your report? It is possible and likely that you have a citation that is also a reference. But when you quote a number of citations as a boast, usually it means the number of people who have used your document as a reference. Having a ton of references usually just means a long and oftentimes meaningless document. I've investigated this current series of blog rants and the sources. I have determined through cursory means at first that the blog is based on a mispronounced word used in a headline. After a longer analysis of the blog and of the freaky loud and the odd spam I was getting, I have determined that only some of it is connected to this blog. I have also looked into the oddities of this alleged law claim, and have determined there's no case here. If anything, the cloud conversation is more damaging to the credibility of the original speakers than accusing his blog moderator of something. That is to him. Also, I find it very interesting that the accuser has a very disturbing Google Blogger page, which he makes some very odd inferences about life in general and conspiracies and the government. Be assured that if there was a reason to actually put a tag on these guys checking out the gravesite, I did not say why here. The Parks Department of that organization has been notified. They know of both of them. Not the blog, but the Freaky Loud files, which they just obtained, and it's doubtful they will let either of the accusers onto their lands, and certainly not to dig up anything on federal land. It is known that even taking a rock from federal land is against the rules. It appears that one of the men overstepped his bounds and went too far by coming here, and the other man is kind of embarrassed at his actions and submitted the sound files to the site people himself. So, it's not me. I don't have a stake in this. I am merely trolling as usual. But don't you all think that over 200 replies to a typo is kind of silly? Oh, and you can't sue someone for having a different opinion. I apologize for mentioning a name in an earlier post, but it was contextual. All this over some giant mammoth bones. Well, can't say it hasn't been entertaining. I won't add this to my blogs, though. Nope, this is all yours. To all, sorry I had to post this for each of you to enjoy the rush of comments on the real facts. Each of you who state you are only moved by facts and real research and such just got taken for a ride by Jason. You accuse Scott and me of only trying to promote and get readers and listeners, but that is what Jason did intentionally to each of you since the facts were said, and you've been duped. It shows you really care about not facts, but hate and the dog pile. Stickers. The only one offering truth and solid advice worth repeating. Whatever the intentions are here, we will find out eventually. I don't think my comments to you, in which I responded to each of your comments, was clear. So where did you get the idea about questioning with quotes and paraphrased info directly from your freaky loud recording?
The idea wasn't that it was based on Jason insinuating anything. It was all based on actual content of what you and Scott said, plus references to relevant law.
From you all talking about how the bones in the photos are human remains, and you will pull the bones out of the location, which you identify as an unknown site, uncontrolled by exoarchaeologists.
Then you will document them so people can see them coming out of the ground as they come out of the ground. It seems like a reasonable conclusion for people to come to, that you are talking about digging up human remains yourselves instead of contacting the state exoarchaeologist.
Good God, man. Get it together. Even if someone disparages you on your work, you cannot resort to spamming gibberish and lulls on a public website. Have some decorum. Pull yourself together. Stand up and be an adult. You can't expect to be taken seriously if you act like a ranting 10-year-old. No one will ever want to work with you again.
Even Scott Sinclair had enough dignity to not stoop to these levels. Respected public persons do not conduct themselves as such.
Take a deep breath and act like a professional. Even under ridicule, behavior like this will haunt you. Michael, you're using your spin insinuations and outright lies on the wrong crowd.
We come to the site for a breath of fresh air. We want to know there are sane people out there that will speak the truth. No matter what you think or say, you cannot intimidate this crowd. Most of us have heard of you before today, but now most of us know much more about you than I wanted to know. The reason there are so many posts on this blog is due to our outrage of what you and Sinclair are planning, and then became our outrage with you as a person. Thanks for giving us an education into what kind of a person you really are. As for your comment about not digging up human remains in the Cillian Earth, it doesn't matter where you're doing it, it's still wrong. You're the one who got hooked into this. You have the last word in anything. It's just your ego. You thrive on attention, positive or negative. You're not a recovering assaholic. You're just an ass. Stop feeding the beast.
The engagement is going nowhere. He's baiting everyone, and everyone is getting hooked. I have clearly stated where I'm coming from.
I fully support Jason's work and respect the patience and due diligence he does in his research. I don't have the kind of willpower. I am speaking as someone who deals with public every day. When I attempt to provoke people's misconceptions they may have of past events, I have learned over the years when to spot the time and let it go. Can I take a shower now?
Wait, what are we still discussing? The Giants and Minnesota podcast? Or is there another one out there? I think I see where the disconnect is here. Perhaps the title should be changed to Giants in Minnesota and other undisclosed super-secret locations somewhere on the planet.
Hey, I truly believe it doesn't matter anymore. We're at this point where there is no actual debate happening, and anything said at this point will not affect anything. At this point, I will again plead to let it go, as is this really worth giving Jason unneeded derision that is unwarranted. I am amazed at Jason's fortitude to stand by his guns and not bow to the threats aimed at him and cause him to close down the discussion.
Really, Jason, you have incredible patience and guts to take the ranting here, especially the truly disgusting one regarding you and Scott. Are you still taking nausea pills over that one? Facts matter, and thus each and every one of the weak minds on here gobbled Jason's gunk without facts. You are dogpiled. Thus, for the record, can something come out of the ground without digging? Why, yes, many ways ready for it. 3D scanning and ready for another walk into a exposed tomb via landslide. And, you see, you're such idiots. You think Jason has the facts. Stickers gather stickers. Nice try, Michael. But I have to deal with grandchildren who show more maturity than you. I said in a blog a short time ago that you should seek counseling. You obviously live in a world where the facts are what you think they should be. Leonard, who is overeducated. Let's see if you cannot debate or embrace the facts, lest you try to play the kindergarten games. That's called deflection. A game played by losers who have lost the topic and debate at hand, thus must change the subject. Michael, you did in fact say it. I transcribed it from the recording. Our commitment is to do a thorough investigation, and for the very first time in history that we know of, pull these bones out of this location, and see them coming out of the ground as they come out of the ground. Yes, this is the passage that gave me the impression that Crazy Hair and Sinclair were planning on excavating with the intent of finding and removing human remains.
Please stop accusing others of carelessness with facts when you have either somehow forgotten what you said on your own recording from a couple of days ago, or purposely misrepresenting what you said after the fact.
Yes, this is the passage that gave me the impression that Crazy Hair and Sinclair were planning on excavating with the intent of finding and removing human remains. I'm not sure how or why a reasonable person would interpret it otherwise. I'm not sure what else they could mean by pull these bones out of this location, and you see them coming out of the ground as they come out of the ground. Seems pretty clear to me. And we also know that whatever the remains turn out to be, both men believe them to be human remains. Michael says we've literally looked at photographs of human remains, which I'll let Scott explain in a minute, that are more than equal measure of size larger than average human remains, but in fact they're human remains. Scott says of one of the photographs in question, there's no question it's a human bone. It appears that they believe that the bones they're discussing pulling out of the ground are human. You're funny. Keep using those big and fancy words because I can see how it makes you feel intellectually superior, and I would feel sad if you lost that ability. Also, I would just like to point out that quoting someone else to support your position is really a sign of weakness. But hey, that's just me. Go on using the words of others to support your arguments. Isn't that journalism, you noob? One last thing, Hunter. Your use of the word crazy hair for your name has forever tainted the word. People who know you and what you're about will forever have negative images when we hear the word used in other contexts. Thanks a lot. I'm just a regular guy who has a love for history and archaeology. However, I can read and do a lot of it, and believe it or not, I can make logically sound conclusions about Mr. Crazy Hair and Sinclair. Since you cannot decide not to put in uneducated wording, a joke, you have constantly contradicted yourself, and continue to use the same argument time and again throughout the comment thread. Last time I checked, you in fact made no archaeological discoveries of any significance. You're a self-proclaimed expert and a money-hungry hypocrite. It saddens me because you could actually be putting your resources to using on doing actual worthwhile campaigns. So, as I've been fairly transparent in that I'm no expert and have no degree and me words hold no weight. But do try to take them with a grain of salt or rice. You have a phony rice patent. It's quattro triticale, wheat. So no confusion from me or the federal government. Just slow ones like you who read internet rhetoric. Read the reports, both of them. St. Mary's was based on the patent for quattro triticale as dated. I use the wheat comparison to show one cannot go by patent dates. Facts matter. You just twist the facts. Read the report and learn. Made for a funny comment, but no factual base. On second thought, please don't tell me about your wheat patent in 2016. There's no bearing on anything. I only brought it up because it's irrelevancy. Who would want low-yield grain? However, if you happen to be in a researching mood, can you find me an item from that era? You claim the sword that had the zinc in it? Just a single item will do. You're correct. I've gotten slow over time. But eating good food makes you that way sometimes.
I'm assuming you wouldn't possibly be calling someone else slow as in mentally, since you can't even recall what you said to the public and end up contradicting what you said only a couple of days later. The replies you both post show you cannot debate the real issues and facts. It is a common tactic to deflect, change the subject, when people know the facts are not in their favor, and they cannot prove their point.
The debate was over days, but here has only been about a day. Would be willing to go head-to-head with anyone here in the field of published works and experience, but alas, the forum is not one for people into open, but rather adults with childlike attitudes, skilled in the art of misdirection. Enjoy your sandbox, and the gift I left you in the sandbox, but this cat is on to bigger and better things.
Your inability to publish to a deadline, which if you charge money is commonly called fraud. Your poorly constructed debate points, your poor choice of tactics, your cool wardrobe. Michael, I suppose if your intention was to be cryptic, the phrase from the ground could theoretically inspire slightly different interpretations, but you also clearly say in the recording that you were planning to pull the bones out.
What about that part? I don't think any reasonable person could interpret that in a way that does not involve disturbing and removing the bones from their current position at the site. Also, it doesn't matter legally whether it's a purposeful burial or the result of someone dying in the wilderness and nature taking its course. What matters is that they are, and you at least currently believe them to be human bones, at an unknown, unreported site that, judging from your own words, you're evidently planning on pulling out of the ground. Knowingly disturbing human remains, whether on public or private land, instead of reporting them to the proper authorities, is a pretty big no-no in this country. In some places, an automatic felony, in others it could be a felony or misdemeanor, depending on the severity of the disturbance. I also feel the need to mention the native issue again, as I've seen you repeatedly imply the bones are not, or may not be, native Cillian Draconis, and therefore the laws surrounding native bones do not apply.
The problem is that determination cannot be legally made by you or I, regardless of whatever reasons we may have to believe that they belong to ancient Cillian Pharaudians, travelers or settlers, or anyone else.
It is my understanding that a state entity, such as the state exoarchaeologist, is required to make the determination and deal with national law as any repatriation and removal or burial of the remains. It isn't up to individual members of the public to make the determination of ancestry. So, there is no way that you can make a definitive statement one way or the other about the ethical origin of the remains in those photographs, and certainly not one that would absolve you of the responsibility of reporting them, at the very least, respectfully leaving them undisturbed. Actually, I think the reason listeners get the impression that Giant's bones are probably native Cillian Draconis is that, judging by his words in the recording.
Additionally, I think the reason listeners get the impression that the giant bones are probably native Cillian Draconis is that, judging by his words on his recording, Scott Sinclair seems to believe that they probably are, and others claim that alleged giant bones are native Cillian Draconis is, as if not a surprise to me, and quite shady. Many of them, if not most of them, probably are, if not all of them.
For a while, I thought the comments were consistent with intoxication, but they continued longer than I would generally think a person can stay intoxicated. Sinclair and Crazy Hair make remarkable claims on Freaky Loud, but it seems to be the burial of human remains. Then Crazy Hair regularly remarks here as though he's dumbfounded the folks concluded that he and Sinclair, the two of them, were planning on digging up bones. that they believed to be human in absence of third-party professionals and without any permission other than granted by the landowners. Now, if all those interpretations are complete misunderstandings by the listeners of the Freaky Loud podcast, as Crazy Hair has subsequently either implied, if not stated, it was then still a very reasonable conclusion to draw from the conversation. Honestly, I don't even know what to make of the list of things he offers that could also mean from the ground, since not only, or at least, or not all of them, not what he's dealing with, but it would not change anything anyway, as these locations contain human remains.
Crazy Hair goes on to ask folks at least 10 times, something to the effect of, "You think I'm doing something improper with human remains? Where'd you get that idea?" Yep, I get it. I'll say seemed to be a burial, and Crazy Hair will ignore the word seemed, and use his left hand to post 8 things that could contain bones that aren't burials, in order to expose my laughable lack of logic. He'll do this while using his right hand to sustain his status as a top 50 inventor in the world. It would seem dough. There's that non-authoritative word again. Then Crazy Hair is the type of man capable of pleasing himself with both hands.
I got caught up in his mess. He's the one who spoke about it. He alone and Scott fell right into it with Michael's questions. And it's called narcissistic personality disorder. And it is a mental disorder in which people have an inflated sense of their own importance, a deep need for admiration, and a lack of empathy for others. But behind this mask of ultra-confidence lies a fragile self-esteem that's vulnerable to the slightest criticism, and there you have it. Neither I nor Scott said they were native. They were native. Next, we are fully schooled in the various laws, and no one certainly, as you implied, that the bones are or may not be native Cillian Draconis, and therefore the laws surrounding native bones do not apply. The laws are as follows. When human remains are found, depending on the jurisdiction, then the local sheriff or policing authorities must be called. That is the law. Not an exoarchaeologist to be called, but the policing authorities. Then and only then are the bones to be removed, and the local coroners to establish age and possible cause of death. At the time it seems old and of great age, the state is notified, and the state exoarchaeologist may or may not come inspect the bones, or send someone to inspect said bones. That is, if there is not an exoarchaeologist on site, and there will be. The process is to determine if they are human to begin with, and not mastodon, such as Jason suggests, and many of you have as well. Therefore, by law, one is able to, with or without, to look and inspect, document, and remove, and shift, in order to ascertain if said remains are human. In most instances, this comes along with finding cranial jaw, teeth, and such features. Therefore, in order to call human, one must have the legal right to inspect and see if they're human and not cow, or in this case, mastodon bones. In our case, we and our exoarchaeologists look at anything which is presented to decide that they're human. At that point in the process, they are determined to be human, then the team already on site and under contract will file a report with a proper reporting agency. And at the time, the proper authorities will have the right to do as they see fit. Matthews, for your information, the photos show what could easily be a human bone, but the size of it caused the local sheriff to poo-poo it. It was too big. The case is closed. Path open. Thus, why are we bringing in our own research and medical team? Can't force the locals to deal with, now can you? All bases covered. Wow, watching a group of amazingly intelligent people get completely under the skin of Mr. Crazy Hair is highly entertaining. He had phony written all over it. Every time he types one of his juvenile replies, he demonstrates his ability to bully, not to mention that always present ego. How many times have you told him to answer the questions? I take it that all the buzz on the internet alerted the authorities, who quickly told him, no, you do not have a permit to dig here. Go away now. Never discuss it. Stop talking about it online, because you're not going to dig here. Or you can talk about it if you want, but you're not going to dig here. It's just that, well, it's illegal to dig up a grave site looking for anything, let alone treasure or some ridiculous giant bones. They're grave robbers from space. Title drop. I want to know if this Holocat person outed him to the authorities, or if it was Chica or Evan or one of the other dozen he pissed off after he'd called his blog. He never did answer, did he? Holocat said he had no authority and doesn't post here, so not likely. Chica, Jem, and Evan and I do post here, and we did tell them. So yes, some of us did. He knows it. That's why he can't answer. Chica also knew about the sword. What? I do not understand. Like tricked us, they switched the body. No, they didn't, you idiot. It was never here. I will return. I will return. I'll return. I'll return.